Hi, everyone. We're glad you could join us for another episode of The Joy of Serging. And today, Pam and I are kind of switching roles, and I'm going to be interviewing Pam. So this is Pam Mahshie, the Queen of Serging, and we're here to listen to a little bit about Pam herself.
Well, thank you, Gail. You know, it's always so much fun to be able to, it's hard to talk about yourself, but it's easy to talk about what I absolutely love, and that's serging. And we've known each other for quite a number of years. We've been spending some time together and developing programs, but also I have a past, and I have joined BERNINA, and I'm so happy to be part of the BERNINA team. And I am the Overlock business manager for BERNINA of America. And I've been working for BERNINA for just over 3 years, almost 4 years now. And I have been working, though, in serging and with sergers for well over 40 years. I hate to even admit that, but
you really started as a child.
Truly, I did.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I did. I started when I was just 19 years old and worked with another company and really loved that opportunity to be able to develop and learn about serging and really understand, just like we talked about how so many times you remember the place and what it was like when you first started even working with a serger. Well, right. I also remember that time because it was kind of a scary time, right? Mm-hmm. And 30 years ago, 40 years ago, sergers were not what they are today. And it makes it so much easier now. And by having this opportunity to spend time with everyone and share what we love, which is serging, we can really give you a lot of information. Over the past years, I've had the opportunity to spend time with Nancy Zieman and do some filming with her, which was a great honor. She was a fantastic leader in our industry and really did give a lot of people great inspiration on working, sewing in general. So Nancy Zieman would take a different machine into the studio for every single stitch that she would have in that particular episode because it was so hard to make changes on the machines. And when we started working more together, I just really found out, that there are so many people that really don't understand sergers and really want to learn more of the ways that you can use them. And a lot of times we'll talk about the overlock stitch or think about it always cutting and always finishing. Sure. And had also the opportunity to spend some time with Martha Pullen and do some filming with her, Martha Pullen's sewing room, learn about serging heirloom sewing, French heirloom sewing with the serger and using the rolled hem in some very unique and different ways. So very lightweight fabrics or sometimes very heavyweight fabrics on sewing with Nancy. And then also worked with Fons and Porter on using sergers for quilting. And I remember spending time with them presenting the serger presentation for using a serger for quilting and piecing. And they sat at one side of the table, with their arms crossed, not really sure because their comment was, I'm a quilter and I don't use a serger, right? Because everyone thought that sergers are for garment construction. So the more we explained to them the way that you could use these machines for piecing and for quilting, they just started opening up and having a much more open understanding of how you can use a serger for quilting. So it's been a real journey for me, but it certainly has been a very fun journey to be able to work and spend time in an industry that I love. But what I always said when I first started working with BERNINA and sat down at the BERNINA machines from the very beginning, I always thought about this: sewing is my life, but it's our viewers' passion. And when they are passionate about sewing and serging, they want to be able to sit down at a machine and use it right away. And that's what I found that the BERNINA machines give them, is that opportunity to really explore their passion even farther.
It's nice. And, that you mentioned Nancy Zieman, because when I first started teaching sewing classes, I found that I would watch Nancy Zieman's show frequently to kind of get down her techniques for presentation, because she was so good at presenting things and how she did her step outs and everything else. So she was just such a tremendous person for the sewing industry, and just for people even who just like to sew for pleasure.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
She's just wonderful.
And learned, I think all of us learned something from her, whether, as you said, it was the presentation skills or it was going to be the actual techniques of putting a shirt collar on. I remember that was one thing that we really found very fascinating. And her, when she first started, I grew up in Wisconsin, and she was like our home extension agent. So my mom and I would go to the courthouse and watch her in her demonstrations before she was even had a sewing show. Yeah. She would come in and teach.
Well, you were
sewing.
lucky. You were her neighbor in Wisconsin.
Yes.
I watched her on a local PBS station in Connecticut, and as I say, she was a tremendous help for me to learn how to teach well, and that's so important with sergers and sewing machines.
Right. So we're going to spend some time, and Gail's we're going to share some ideas back and forth of ways that we just absolutely love to use the sergers. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
For sewists, nothing sparks a surge in creativity like the revolutionary L8 series serger machines, only from BERNINA. With quick, automatic one-step air threading, quiet, whisper-soft operation, and total control right at your fingertips. All sewists can serge with the greatest of ease. So take your imagination to the next level with BERNINA, made to create.
Well, Pam, I see some fantastic samples of cover stitching and chain stitching on the table. So why don't we show our viewers some of these and talk about cover stitching and chain stitching? It's not just for garments.
No, not at all. So, a lot of times people will think about sergers, and the difference between an overlock machine and a combo machine is that you can sew in the middle of your fabric. So this is one. Every time I would show it initially, because someone would look at it and they would say, oh yeah, it's nice. And then we would say, oh, but all of that is stitching.
Yes.
To create this fabric. And then it's like, oh my goodness, you created that fabric by sewing in the middle of our fabric. You can create the distance between the different stitches using a seam guide and setting the distance between each of those rows by simply drawing maybe 2 or 3 lines on your fabric, and then using that seam guide, whether it's the left or the right seam guide, in order to create those distance between each of those lines. So on here we have the red lines of stitching are the narrow cover stitch, and then the narrow straight lines, which look like straight lines of stitching, are the chain stitch.
I love the chain stitch. And this is using 12-weight threads?
It's 12-weight threads and your blending thread technique.
Yeah.
That everyone's going to have to check out on your YouTube channel.
Oh, yes. They will definitely have to check that out. And, the nice thing, too, about this looking like a plaid versus a print is that it's a little bit more dimensional, which I think is really nice. Textured, dimensional. It's just beautiful.
And it can really add to what your project is the end result.
Tremendously.
You want those stitches to really help enhance the look of whatever kind of project you're going to be working on.
And I don't know if the camera can catch it, but Pam even did some chain stitching. It's black stitching on the black fabric. I don't know, probably we can get a close-up of that, but it's very pretty, even on the back.
Tonal, no matter if you're doing tone on tone or if you're going to be doing bold color stitching. And these are just big buttons that
Big, beautiful buttons.
Big, beautiful buttons
yes,
that
they
I
are.
like a little bling, because that always sets it apart.
It does. This is beautiful. Well, let's take a look at something with a little bit different feel. I think this speaks to your being a Texan.
My region of living. Yeah, so this is actually cork fabric. So, one thing that back to Nancy Zieman again. She always said you pay for both sides of your fabric. So this is actually the wrong side of a piece of cork. But it worked well with the hide print on the other side, so it blended very well with the coloring. And by having the features on our sergers that we have on our sewing machines, the back kick feature and needle up and down, you can actually pivot, just as you can see if you flip that around, you see all those diamonds that are there. Those diamonds, by being able to have your needle always stop in the down position, allows you to pivot so much more easily than having to, zoom up very close to a point and then overshoot it or come to short on the stitching.
As I used to do before I had a machine that had that little back kick feature. Yeah, fantastic.
Those features, the little things mean a lot.
Yeah.
And, I think we've said this before, that the machines, it'll improve your sewing capabilities.
It makes us look like better sewers
It makes
than
us
we
look
might
like
be.
better sewers. That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
And we don't tell anybody any different either.
Not
So,
at all. Not at all.
That's very cool.
Now, one other thing that I have here, and this again is the chain stitching.
This is so cool.
But I love texture and quilting, and so many times we'll think about using our sergers only for garments, but using it for cork and using it on wovens and using it on a wide variety of fabrics. And these are also different weights of threads that have been combined together to create that different texture.
I think I see some 8-weight threads in here.
Yes,
yeah,
I do.
So dimensional and beautiful. It's really fantastic. And these machines have no problem whatsoever with 8 weights and double 8 weights even.
Yeah, whether it's in the needle or in the loopers.
That's right. That's
and
right.
when we sew these, we sew them upside down.
Yes,
Yeah.
we do. And that's always the fun thing, is that you just see what looks like a straight stitch from your sewing machine as you're stitching along. And then you get the fun reward when you flip the fabric over, which is kind
and
of
so
cool.
many of these stitches really have two parts to them. They have the right side and they have the wrong side. So you can use either side of that stitch.
Or the right side and the other right side.
And the other right side.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah,
So
these are
Gail, you
beautiful.
have also a sample here that we looked at, and I want you to share that with everyone that's watching also, because this is just a really, really fun project, sustainable project.
This, I wanted to make, I wear a lot of red, as you can see, and I wanted to make a winter version of my crossbody bag, but I wanted to do something different other than applique, and on the black velveteen one that you saw, that was a dressier version. But this one, I tried this stitch out a few months ago, and I wasn't sure whether it was going to work or not, but I call it the woven cover stitch. In fact, I have a tip clip coming out on it very quickly. And all this is stitching with an 8-weight thread in the chain looper and the wide cover stitch with my left and right needle in. And the reason I chose that stitch is because I had this thick and thin yarn, the bumpy yarn, and I had a very large-eyed needle that I used, and I wove it over and under the stitching. And the cool
Look
thing...
at that circle that's on the back there.
Yes, even though I haven't abandoned that 2-thread flat lock, that you use mostly in straight lines. But with the cover stitch, I can do circles. And with that clear curved foot, I was even able to get a perfect little circle on it, which
That's
was kind of cool. Yeah.
Now tell them what your fabric is.
This fabric was the sleeve of a felted sweater, and I used the rest of it for a project years ago. So all I had left was the sleeve, and that was why I said
And that's why we never get rid of anything.
That's
right?
why it's important to have a large stash always on hand for things. And in fact, I was looking, I didn't even have enough to make, and I really didn't want to make the handle out of a felted sweater, but I did go through my stash, and I just happened to have the right color cotton for this. And I actually have a piece of grosgrain ribbon in here to stabilize it, because it's just a quilting weight cotton.
And you made that using your cover stitch.
I did.
Yes.
I did. Yes, I used that with the wide cover stitch as well. But this is just a fun technique to do, and again, very dimensional. And I love anything that adds dimension to fabric surfaces, so it's really kind of fun.
And that's one thing that these cover stitch and chain stitches can do, is they can really add that depth and dimension that we really are looking for in many of, and high-end items that will make our projects take on a different level of expertise, as well as really impress a lot of our friends and family that we're showing and making these things for.
And the cool thing about cover and chain stitching in a decorative mode is all you're doing is stitching. You're not doing anything really difficult or doing a lot of manipulation. You might change your stitch length, but I don't even change my tension settings no matter what weight thread I'm using. It's incredible.
Right.
It's wonderful.
My first big day was when my mom taught me how to sew. It did something to me, like being able to create something with your hands and understand the machinery. I got the bug.
Pam, Bernina has a whole series of these big book series, and this one is the Big Book of Serging, and I have found this to be so amazing as a resource, not only for myself, and I do know a few things about sergers, but I recommend this all the time to people who are newer or
even experienced people that serge. Use that as reference material because there are different stitches that are in it. It does have information that covers all of the Bernina machines, all of the Bernina sergers in here as well.
And it's beautifully presented too.
Yeah, lots of colored pictures that are in here that relate specifically to each of the individual machines, the categories as well. So that it's not just for one specific machine model, but it is for the entire line of Bernina machines.
It is, yes.
And it talks about threads and techniques and settings and how to clean your machine. You know, we all need to do that every once in a while.
I don't do it often enough.
I know, I don't either. I don't either. But you know,
I'm too busy having fun using it.
Well, that's the thing. It's kind of like, you know, making sure that you have gas and oil in your car. You need to make sure that you do some maintenance on that every once in a while.
Yeah.
Not that I always do that myself either. No. But you know, Gail, you know, when we look at the Bernina machines, and this is one reason that this is the reason that I'm here, is because of the L8 series of machines, because they are so easy to use. They have so many features that make a sewist's life much more fun, more productive. And you know, when we take a look at the machine itself, you referenced having the guided mode or having the built-in tutorial. I like to call that guided mode the GPS of sewing because that's really what it does.
That's a perfect description.
It takes you from whatever stitch you're on to whatever stitch you want to go to.
And back again.
And back again. Right. And sets everything along the way. So there's no guesswork in making the change from whatever stitch you would be on to go to, let's say, a chain stitch. We have looked at so many of those samples that have the chain and the cover stitch on it, and this was set for an overlock stitch. So just like changing your machine, your sewing machine, from embroidery to sewing or over to embroidery from sewing, you have a few steps along the way, but it makes it very easy for you to make an adjustment.
I was so impressed when I first got this machine and saw that the videos in it were so fantastic. And not only were they great for learning how to set up a stitch, but they're even in color and they play in a loop, so you can play it over and over and even pause it as you go along. And that's exactly what I mentioned in another video for threading the chain needles for cover stitching. That was the one thing I wasn't sure about on this machine with the one-path threading. It was a brand new concept for me. But it showed me. So it was too late to call you, even though you're on a different time zone.
So when we work with all of the settings that are in these machines, you know, there are features that are on the machines that we don't use on a regular basis either.
Yes.
And you can, as you mentioned, touch the videos, and that really makes it so much easier for anyone that's using the machine to understand exactly what that feature does for them.
And talking about things that you don't normally do every single day, that you may have a specialty technique or something like maybe you don't use a cover stitch all the time, but you might go a couple of months between projects when you are using it. You can save the settings that you love for a garment or any other type of project.
Your favorite stitch, the twice as nice stitch that we were working with,
yes,
right?
the twice as nice stitch.
You can set up and memorize 100 stitches in this machine so that you, even if it's a basic stitch, you have all of the different settings for gathering and elastic and the twice as nice stitch using decorative threads.
Yeah, in fact, I have a couple of twice as nice stitches in my memory, one using the 12-weight threads, one using the 8-weight threads, because I think I changed the stitch length a little bit on that. And I don't have to have a million different little scraps of paper all over the
taped
place.
all over the front of your machine to know, or put in your instruction book. Exactly. Put in your instruction book, and then when you go back to read those notes, you're like, what did I even mean by that?
Where you can't read your writing.
You can't read your writing. I know. So it's all programmed right in here, and I love that.
It's so fantastic. Feature. And you know, I love the needle up, needle down. That's the same as your sewing machine too, which is fantastic. Most of the time I'm needle up, but you do have that ability, as you said, for pivoting.
Correct.
So that's
and there are
fantastic.
features that have carried over to the serger also, so that it really makes it feel more like a sewing machine than it does a serger.
And I've owned a lot of different brands and worked on a lot of different sergers, and this is the only one that I have ever had on a tabletop without a mat under it, because the vibration on it is so minimal and it's so quiet. I couldn't believe how quiet it was, that you don't need anything under it to muffle sound.
So we encourage you to go and experience any of these L8 or Bernina sergers for yourself at your local Bernina dealer.
Well, thanks for joining us today, and thank you, Pam Mahshie, for telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the sewing industry and all about your journey to the Bernina sergers, and it's been really fun. Thank you. And thank you for taking me along for the ride.
Oh, you're welcome. It's always a pleasure.
Join us again soon for another exciting episode.